Hey everybody, it's Yophi here, coming to you with a video that's not particularly strictly Bible-based, but it does have to do with our lives and how we need to live as a Christian. So I do want to address certain things. A subscriber came to me and I really had to explain some terms that are thrown around very heavily, and our youth is greatly deceived by these terms because what's happening, and I've said it several times, the world is taking terms and they are redefining them by the way that they're used. And because they're used that way, people are now beginning to think, especially the young people, that this is what this term means. And it doesn't mean that. So we have to tell people the truth so that they can come to a proper decision for themselves. That makes sense. So I'm going to go over 6 terms. Some are used more than others, but they're generally used. What these terms do is they shut down conversation. And Christian, that is dangerous. A lot of times we try to take that scripture talking about a servant of the Lord must not strive, or we use the common don't go back and forth. That is foolish. Okay. Now, are you supposed to get into a bitter argument with someone? Of course not, because that doesn't produce life. But we do need to have conversation. We do need to know what we're talking about, and we do need to address people. We need to address issues. We need to address topics, because it's our children who are going to be deceived by these types of terms because we're not addressing them. We are becoming irrelevant to the society. We're becoming very relevant to the church, but what is it, like 15 to 20% of people, the youth, are going to church? So it's not very effective to be influential in your church, but not influential in the world. We are supposed to be the light of the world, the salt of the earth. But a lot of people, their salt has lost their flavor, okay? So look at these terms. The terms that are thrown around to generally shut down conversation because they trigger an emotional response in people are the words racist, sexist, homophobe, misogynist, hate, and judge. These 6 words are thrown around so much that whenever anyone hears them or whenever anyone identifies you as one of these, it tends to shut down all ability to converse because you find yourself trying to defend against these terms. Now, if somebody does this, what you should do, Christian, if someone calls you any of these, racist, sexist, homophobe, misogynist, hateful, or a judge, you should ask them, what do you mean by that? Because if they have to define the term, you'll find that you're not doing that. You know, if you are, of course, you don't need to be on this video. You need to learn to stop doing that because that's not what a Christian does. But let's take a look. A racist. Racist is actually a person who believes, because racism, ism, and ist is a person. So a racist is a person who believes that because of his or her ethnicity, that he or she is actually superior to every other race or every other ethnicity. Now, if you see my channel, you already know that there is no such thing as race. There's only the human race. So dark skin, light skin, that doesn't matter, okay? The amount of melanin that one has in their skin has nothing to do with race. There is one race, and that is the human race. So this term technically doesn't even exist. It is a made-up word, okay? So I know that you have people talking about black people and white people and the issues in America and such, but this term is thrown out if you so much as call someone black or white or Chinese or Mexican. Kids do not know that this is a person who believes himself superior because of his ethnicity. Okay, they throw it around with the president, they throw it around with everybody. And all it does is cause emotions to rise up so that a person does not listen to you anymore. That's what they do when they just yell out racist. When the truth is that if you don't feel that you're superior to other people because you're black or white or Chinese or Spanish or or Japanese, whatever the case. If you don't feel that way, you're not a racist. Okay? Can you say things that might hint to that? Yes. But that's a heart issue, and we're going to get down to that because there's a word that you're actually going to need. It's called judgment. Okay? Now, moving on to sexist. Sexist is a person who believes himself or herself superior due to gender. So if I feel that as a male that I am superior to females, that would be sexism. Okay? Or if you are a woman and you feel that you're superior to males, that's sexism. Because just based on your gender, you're not superior to anyone. Okay? Males and females are different. We need to appreciate our differences, and we need to cherish those things. But to just say, I'm a male, so I'm superior, that's sexism. Now, granted, as a male, I am naturally, physically superior. Okay? However, that does not mean that I am superior to women. I'm not. Because men, good luck having a baby. You know, can your body take that? We are very different, and we need to appreciate our differences. Okay? So sexism is that. All right? But a lot of people throw out the term just because you use what's called gender roles. Right? If you have women are the only ones who have a baby, oh, that's sexist. No, it's not. Women are supposed to have babies. Your body's made to have a baby. Women have babies so easily that women get pregnant by accident. They're not even trying to get pregnant. They just do. Some women who are on birth control still get pregnant. Your bodies are made for that. Men, we're not made for that. We're just not made to handle that. Okay? God did not create us that way, right? So it doesn't mean that one is sexist or not just because we talk about differences between men and women. It means that there are gender roles. Okay? Now let's look at another one. The third one is called a homophobe. Now, this one's thrown out a lot with Christianity because we are against homosexuality, the lifestyle of homosexuality, right? So they say homophobe. The reason why homophobe is even a thing is because it is actually a medical term. When you get phobia, that means a diagnosed fear of something in the brain, okay? It's like if you have arachnophobia. If you see a spider, your brain, the chemicals and fear starts producing, and you cannot handle yourself properly at that point, okay? Now, when you think of homophobia, see, now that means that you would, upon seeing someone who's homosexual, have an adverse fear of them, just like spiders. How does this relate? Well, if someone disagrees with the lifestyle of homosexuality, how does that make them in fear of homosexuals? You can disagree with the lifestyle of it and not be in fear. I am not in fear of a pornographic star. That does not mean that I agree with watching pornography, right? I'm not in fear of violence. That does not mean that I want violent movies in my house. I'm not in fear of it. You see? I even practice boxing and kickboxing and things like that when I work out. I'm not in fear of the violence. I just don't endorse it. You see? But when you put a phobia attached to it, it makes it appear as if there's something wrong with your brain, which is why the word homophobia or homophobic or homophobe is thrown out at Christians, because it makes it appear as if there's something actually mentally wrong with you because you disagree with the lifestyle of homosexuality. You see, that word is thrown out there to end conversation, because if somebody calls you that, you have to now defend yourself and say, I'm not this, I'm not that, when that's not true. A person who is homophobic has an adverse fear of homosexuals, which generally we do not. We just disagree with the lifestyle. It's the same thing as if a person disagrees with guns. You're not a gun phobe. You just don't like the idea of killing people with guns, right? And some people don't have a problem with that. This is not about gun control. This is just about these terms. There's a difference between disagreeing with the lifestyle and being phobic of something. But be careful, because that term is thrown out. And trust me, the people who use it, or who started using it in the very beginning when they started calling Christians homophobic, knew what they were doing. Because the APA, the American Psychological Association, it used to diagnose homosexuality as a mental disorder. But because of politics and because of money, now all of a sudden, it's not a disorder anymore. Instead, now the Christians have the mental disorder. You see how that works? You should look through history of the 70s and the 80s. This is when this took place. Now you got a new generation that no matter what, if you disagree with homosexuality, the first and only word that comes out of their mouth is homophobe. When that is not what that word means at all. You do not have a mental disorder. So you should really ask, what do you mean by homophobe? Because if they say, well, you disagree with it, you should tell them, have you considered that that's not what homophobia is? Okay, and you might actually be able to get some discussion. All right. The next one is misogynist. Now, misogynist is not used as often, but it is a male who has a strict prejudice against women. All right. Now, prejudice is prejudging, and we'll get down to judging in a minute. But a person who prejudges women, okay, is generally a misogynist. They have strict prejudice, which means that even after evidence, they will not change their judgment. Okay? Now, let's talk about prejudice for a second, because I know that that's not one of the words, but you have to really get into that, because prejudice is not always bad. We think of prejudice as bad because of the civil rights movement, and there are laws against prejudging as far as like giving a job or things like that. You cannot just say this person is black, so that means that they must be this. Okay? And you cannot withhold jobs from them and things like that. But prejudging is not always a bad thing. All right. Sometimes there are times where you feel that this is a dangerous situation and you make a judgment before the situation even comes to you. That is called the prefix pre means before, judgment. You are judging before you know. So if a male judges a woman before he knows her, that is prejudice. If a man judges another man before he knows them, that is prejudice. But what if you're right? What if this person is trying to hurt this person and you just get a feeling and you're just like, I don't necessarily want to go to this person's house? That's a prejudgment. It's not always a bad thing. Prejudice is a bad thing when you get into like misogyny, where you refuse to change your judgment even after you get evidence. Okay? That's what a misogynist is. Now, it doesn't mean that if you get back up to sexism, it doesn't mean that if you address gender roles, okay? Because sometimes in these gender roles, you might expect, if you get married, sometimes, get this, in marriage, a man expects his wife to actually have children with him. That's not misogyny. That's just, it's a gender role. He expected that. He did prejudge. Maybe he should have found out before they got married, but he didn't. But it's not misogyny to have that prejudice against women. Oh, we're just supposed to have your babies for you. Yeah, when you get married, yeah, that's what a lot of people expect. Now, granted, that's not every marriage, but we're talking about the standard, not the exception. All right, a misogynist is someone who has strict views and prejudices against women and will not change them. So you have to ask, what do you mean by that if somebody calls you this? All right, and then we're going to get into the last two, because I don't like the videos to be too long, but I hope that you're actually learning these. Hopefully you're writing them down. Your education will increase by 40% if you write it down. All right, so then you get into hatred, because I hear this used all the time whenever you're addressing an issue, right? Hatred is a strong feeling of disgust or distaste for someone or something, all right? And people often try to use hate against Christians because you disagree with a certain movement or a lifestyle or a sin, all right? You have to understand, God is love. That's true. However, there are multiple times, Old Testament and New Testament, that talks about things that God hates. Now, how can God be love and also possess hate? Well, I tell you that because God is love, he has to hate. Because hate is the disgust or distaste for something. So if God has these attributes, then the opposite things of those attributes has to be hate. He has to hate things. So for instance, if God loves children, which he does, then the killing of children, God hates that because that's the opposite of his nature. It is the opposite of God's nature to kill children, right? So hatred, what do you mean by hatred? Okay, do I hate a certain action? Yes, there are actions that I do hate. Do I hate people? No. You don't have to agree with everything just because someone calls you hateful, right? Hateful is a strong feeling of distaste or disgust. Do I have disgust for men or women? No. Do I have a strong taste or a strong feeling of disgust for what is being done? Of course. Of course. The idea of ruining what God has established as marriage, of course I hate that. Why would I like that? Does it mean that I'm overwhelmed? Does it mean that I am bitter? No. But as far as the action itself, that is true. So you have to understand, what do you hate? What do you mean by hate? Do you mean that I just disagree with you? Because we might disagree, but you should know that that's not hate. And any parent will tell you that. Because if you have a child that is throwing, let's just say, chairs at a teacher. He's 6 years old and he's picking up chairs and he's throwing it at a teacher. Now the parent's going to disagree with that. The parent's going to stop that child. If you love your child, you're not going to agree with that and let your child do whatever he wants. You're going to stop that child. And you're going to discipline that child because you're hurting yourself and you're hurting others. Does that mean that you hate the child because you don't let them do what they want? What if the child says that he loves doing it? What if the child says that that's what he likes? Are you hating that child? No. So you have to understand, what is hate? All right? Ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by hate? And you'll find that a lot of times it's just, you disagree with me, so I want to shut down conversation. Because if we actually have to explain things out, we'll find that I have no justification. They don't have any justification for calling you that, right? And the last one is judge. I have made so many videos on this channel about judgment. A judgment is a conclusion about something or someone. That's what a judgment is. It is not good or bad. It is a conclusion. When you reach a conclusion, you say the conclusion. That's it. Hey, you're a really nice guy. That's a judgment. What you did over there was not acceptable. Judgment. I like your eyes. They're beautiful. Judgment. All of these things are judgments. And it's funny how no one tells you not to judge until you make a judgment that they don't like. You see, we love judging as long as it's a good judgment in our favor. But if there's a bad judgment, we'll say, Jesus said, don't judge. And I highly tell Christians, do not listen to any atheist or agnostic or any Christian who tells you that Jesus said, don't judge, because Jesus never said it. Go to Matthew 7 and you will read and you will find out that Jesus did not say, don't judge. If you look at Matthew 7, he is not telling you not to judge. He's telling you how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. You're supposed to judge the way God judges. And being that atheists don't believe in God, they don't know how God judges. So there's no reason why anybody should say, don't judge, leave the judging up to God. You're supposed to judge. You're just supposed to judge righteously. Okay? So when you look at somebody and you make a conclusion, the way that you're living is going to hurt you. It's going to hurt others. Okay? It's hurting this. It's hurting that. Those are all judgments. If somebody doesn't like that, then congratulations, you just convicted them. And they don't want to hear what you have to say because that means that they would have to stop doing what they want. But it's the same as if they get into a courtroom and the judge has to pronounce, you will live this way for the next 5 years. They might not like the judgment, but that's a judgment. And their actions brought it upon themselves. So when someone says, don't judge or leave the judging up to God, what do you mean by judgment? Okay? Or you can simply ask this: you're judging me for judging, because that's what they're telling you to do. They're telling you, they're making a judgment and saying you can't judge. That's a judgment to say that. You see, all of these things go into judging. And if you understand your terms, then it's a lot easier to deal with that. Okay? So those 6 terms, they're used a lot by political leftists, okay? Racist, sexist, homophobe, misogynist, hateful, and judge. And they use hateful a lot and judge for Christians specifically, and homophobe, really, right? So be careful. When people throw these terms out, know how to counteract them, because all they're trying to do is shut down discussion. And of course, some people you can't have a discussion with, but when you're talking with people, you really need to get your terms straight first and foremost, so that nobody actually is confused and those terms don't get thrown out there and conversation gets shut down. Because if you can't have conversation, nobody knows what's going on, and then they live their truth, which is a complete lie, and we'll do that in another video. All right? So I hope that this has blessed you. Leave a comment if you have a question. If you have a disagreement, that's okay. All right? But I bless you in Jesus' name, and I'll see you in a little while. All right? Peace.